Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing New.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. The PBC are full of frauds, duckers, and cowards. They're the no smoke crew, and we have to be honest and unbiased when we analyze what the PBC is. The PBC is bad for boxing. The PBC does not make sense for boxing. They do not want to play well with others. They do not want to unify titles. They do not want to cross the street and face the best fighters. The only way that boxing grows and survives is by crossing that street, facing the other fighters, and all we get from the PBC fighters are lip service. But what we get from Al Heyman is shown actions of not wanting to work with others and wanting to keep as many and all fights in-house as possible. You have to understand, when we start breaking it down, you see Terence Crawford left out of the list of welterweight champions. During the Manny Pacquiao-Keith Thurman fight, they had Errol Spence, Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman, and even Manny Pacquiao, who's a regular champion. But there was no mention of Terence Bud Crawford. Terence Bud Crawford tweeted his reply and stated, the hate is real when they don't acknowledge the fact that you're a title holder. They didn't acknowledge the fact that he's a title holder. And, that's disgusting. According to Mike Coppinger, during the segment with Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz, they described Andy Ruiz as the IBF and WBA champion. They didn't mention the fact that he's a WBO champion as well. And the PBC as an organization is no longer recognizing the WBO world title. And so this explains the omission of the Terence Crawford amongst the welterweight champion. So they're going so far to duck Terence Crawford, to avoid Terence Crawford, to count Terence Crawford out, is that they don't even want to acknowledge the fact that he's a world champion. Mike Coppinger also stated, from what he's been told, Heyman believes the WBO is heavily biased toward Frank Warren and Top Rank. But at the end of the day, even if you believe they're heavily biased, if Errol Spence is the great elite fighter that everyone makes him up to be, why don't you send him over there, go get that belt? You can do a joint promotion, a joint pay-per-view like Bob Arum has stated. Why don't he go get that WBO belt and end any bias? That's the simplest way to do it. And not to mention, the PBC has had the WBC in their pocket and even the WBA at times in their pocket for years. So let's not be biased. Let's be honest and unbiased. At the end of the day, Al Heyman, the PBC, simply does not want Terence Crawford to be involved. They want to exile the WBO because they don't want to work with other promotional companies. This is bad for boxing. And then you start out with Errol Spence. Errol Spence stated that Terence Crawford put him on notice. Hey, he gets that belt. We can make it happen. Now, Errol Spence, you got to be honest and unbiased. Spence said out of his own mouth that Terence Crawford gets a belt, he'll fight him right away. Now all of a sudden Terence Crawford gets a belt, he's no longer interested in the fight. You have to be honest and unbiased. Errol Spence is part of the no smoke crew at the PBC. The PBC condones this action, and they're trying to have him delay that fight for as long as possible to either the public loses interest, Terence Crawford ages out, Terence Crawford loses, or Terence Crawford will be forced to come over to the PBC to do that fight, and Top Rank will have no affiliation or control in the fight. That's what these guys are hoping to do. This is what these guys are trying to do. And unfortunately for the PBC, Errol Spence Jr. and Shawn Porter is not worthy of being a pay-per-view fight. It's a good fight. It's an entertaining fight, but it's not worthy of being a pay-per-view fight. The PBC is getting greedy with the pay-per-views. Errol Spence, went off on Terence Crawford and, already stated that, he'd rather fight Shawn Porter or Keith Thurman first. He'd rather fight Manny Pacquiao first. He'd rather fight many people before he would fight Terence Crawford, when we all know that Terence Crawford is the only fight in the welterweight division that makes you a pound-for-pound fighter. None of these other fights put you in the top 3 pound-for-pound. None of them. None of these other fights are going to pay you what the Crawford fight's going to pay you. None of them. So you have to be honest and unbiased. And then you look at Deontay Wilder turning down a $100 million deal to fight Anthony Joshua. The PBC, that Al Heyman is supposed to be an advisor, and he's obviously bad for business. Look at Deontay Wilder. People say, oh, Anthony Joshua lost. Now we know who's ducking who. That makes absolutely no sense. Only an idiot and a moron would say that. Because at the end of the day, you don't throw away a $100 million deal. There's no way he's going to get $100 million out of a deal with Anthony Joshua right now. Because at the end of the day, even if he beats Andy Ruiz, it's still not going to be the same. People have lost the momentum for that fight. And so Deontay Wilder screwed himself out of $100 million, and the worst advisor in the history of boxing, Al Heyman, has allowed him to throw away an opportunity for $100 million by betting on himself. He's already returned less money than what he would have made. He would have made over $20 million for Dominic Brazil. He's made less than half of that. So what's the point of turning down $100 million betting on yourself just to fight a Luis Ortiz again? That makes absolutely no sense. You have to be honest and unbiased. Then you look at Gervonta Davis and Tevin Farmer. They've already offered Eddie Hearn Matchroom. Tevin Farmer's already offered PBC over $5 million for that fight. They've already said that they want to make that fight. They've already going to pay him an enormous money. They can do a joint promotion. Now Eddie Hearn is even backtracking and say that they will go on Showtime for that fight. These guys are ducks. They don't want to fight real competition. They want to fight guys moving up in weight, and they want to bash tomato cans all day. These guys don't really want to fight the best. And then you have the troll of the century with the PBC, Leonard Ellaby, and he said it, in my opinion, if this is factual about Dillian Whyte and I'm Andy Ruiz, I'm going nowhere near the UK for the rematch with Anthony Joshua. Don't do it, Andy. Now, first of all, Leonard Ellaby makes absolutely no sense because Dillian Whyte is not Anthony Joshua. That's one. Two, when you look at the situation, Anthony Joshua's never failed a PED test. But the fact that he would allow Deontay Wilder and, Luis Ortiz to fight in the U.S. and will not say a word, when clearly Luis Ortiz has failed multiple PED tests. So if Luis Ortiz has failed in tests in the U.S., there's more fighters failing in the U.S. than there is in the U.K. That makes no sense. But you want to blackball Anthony Joshua? See, this is what guys mean when they're just trying to do publicity stunts. They're trying to get control of the fight, and they're trying to place it where they want it so they can have the biggest advantage. It's about A-sides in boxing. Floyd Mayweather Jr. would never allow a fighter, even if he lost, to get the rematch somewhere else because you would have signed the contract. The same with Canelo Alvarez. At the end of the day, when you have elite level fighters, the A-side and fighters, you have to beat the A-side twice to become the A-side. You have to beat them in the initial match and in the rematch. Then you prove to the world that was no fluke. Then you prove to the world that I can handle them. You're a world champion, so that means you fight wherever you need to in the world, and the A-side dictates the rematch. You have to be honest and unbiased. The PBC fighters, their advisors, Leonard Ellaby, all of these guys are just in-house promotions. These guys don't want to fight anyone. PBC is bad for boxing. They don't want to make the best fights. They don't want to line up the best fighters, and all of their fighters are ducks. These guys want no smoke. But once again, unbiased as always, it's the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.